Hello, innovators. I'm Dustin Miller PolyInnovator. Today we're talking with Ranjit from GetPolymath, a polymathic productivity planner. Thank you for joining me on the Polymath Polycast, a show about becoming a polymath and all the areas in between. There's a lot of poly in that right there. Please say hello to the innovators in the audience.
Hey, Innovators, how you doing?
Hello and welcome to the Polymath Polycast. Well, I'm very glad to have you on the show today. When I saw your brand even a while back, I was like, oh, this is really cool. I really need to actually organize my productivity better as well. And then I was reaching out to Get Polymath and then getting directed to you. This whole process has just been more and more learning new things and just kind of getting more and more excited to talk to you. So why don't you share something about yourself that no one knows about you?
Something that no one knows about me. It's a great question. I think I'm very transparent, so there's very few things that people don't know about me. Here's something that's small, but definitely noticeable. I love sticky notes. I love the tactile aspect of it, putting notes everywhere. I much prefer it to OneNote or Google Drive or anything like that.
Really? So you like that, like the physical aspect versus digital?
Absolutely, absolutely. It's that mind-body connection that I think we kind of miss. And I'm a data engineer, so like I'm all on the computer all the time, and I fully support technology. I just think that sometimes it's worth disconnecting from it.
Yeah, I even remember hearing a psychological tip about how just having that hand on the paper actually makes you remember it better than typing it.
Yeah, there's this. I should probably dive a little bit deeper into those types of studies, but there's been a lot of research on actually writing something down and how it becomes like a real intention in your subconscious.
Yeah, definitely. And it's kind of funny how you say that you really like the paper. I've never actually told anybody this on a recording, but I've always had this like strong aversion to the feeling of paper. Just never liked it. And it's always just made me cringe in a way. So it's always kind of funny. Whenever I was in high school, I would never use an agenda. But like now with digital, there's always interesting developments with that. So kind of diving right in, you got started cooking as a chef and productivity with Get Polymath and investing going on. But what got you started before all of that? What was your mindset?
What was my mindset? So that is a fantastic question. I think I had this idea that I could be whatever I wanted.
Mm-hmm.
And I had this like abundant opportunity mindset where like I'm looking at everything and I'm like, everything here can be let's say leveraged. Not I don't want to say taken advantage of, but like you can take the situation you're in and turn it into something that is beneficial to you. And that was kind of my mindset throughout the early days of my life, and that kind of just got me started.
Yeah. What did you do before Get Polymath and being a chef?
Yeah, so I had right out of school, I started a little company with two of my friends. This was actually out of an independent study, and what we did was we found a lot of correlations between cybersecurity like exploits and the financial stability of companies. So we had this like correlation there, and what we decided to do is collect a bunch of cybersecurity data on the S&P 500, and then package it up as an API and sell it to financial institutions as like another metric that they can use in their models. And after getting shut out of AWS and Azure, we decided that it was time to close doors unless we could afford a bunch of hardware. So from there, I was kind of like sitting around like, okay, what am I going to do now? And then all these other things kind of just fit in. Started listening to my passions more than my want for money or anything like that.
Yeah. And I think that some of the most successful people in life have often been those who started out chasing after money or something like that, and then they realized that there was more important things to life than money.
Yeah, 100%. That I spent a whole summer inside coding, and at that point, I was like, I just missed the whole summer.
Yeah.
And I was like, there's got to be more to this thing. Yeah.
Well, and it's like it's interesting with coding too, because you can just get delved in so much. I know there's a lot of talk about getting into the state of flow, and so a lot of athletes talk about getting into the zone. What's the kind of feeling you get when you get into the zone of or flow of coding?
It's this almost urgency where my mind is thinking faster than my fingers can type.
Wow.
And I'm just like, if my fingers can go any faster, then I could probably put everything I want into PyCharm or whatever. But right now it doesn't work like that. So I have to like, pace myself.
Yeah.
And it's this like battle between thinking really fast and doing it efficiently.
You know, it's interesting. Just earlier today, I was watching a TikTok of a programmer. She literally does warm-ups. She'll do different stretches for her fingers and then type word per minute typer tester games. I can't even speak today. She'll do like a little typing game, and she won't stop until she gets to 150 words per minute, which she said was pretty quick. But I thought it was interesting how she spends time out of her day to warm up before programming. But considering that that's going to be the major part of your day, I get it.
That's what is it? Abraham Lincoln said, you give me 6 hours to chop a tree, I'll use the first 5 to sharpen the axe.
Yeah. So you have a pretty strong social media presence, not very omni-channel in the way, but you are focused on the platforms that you are on. What do you really like about posting to, say, like Instagram?
I like Instagram a little bit more than Twitter, just because I'm more visual. And I think the reason that Instagram has just way more content and users and, active daily users or whatever is purely because it's visual. You can look at a photo and get like the whole picture is worth 1,000 words. You get it immediately, right? Twitter requires a little bit more effort, and that's like just enough effort to make it inaccessible to a larger group of people. So yeah, also it's easy and it's kind of fun. So
well, and I've heard a lot of experts always say too to focus on one platform, that kind of thing. It's interesting how you were mentioning that you're a visual person. One thing that I've struggled with, and I know other people do when it comes to programming, is that since you are coding, it's just line after line, syntax. You don't necessarily, unless you can picture it in your head, you don't see any visuals to it. So how does that dichotomy work for you?
So I actually draw out diagrams of where data is flowing ahead of time. And then based on basically a picture, I just implement whatever I've designed.
Interesting. So you do a lot of like mind maps and post-its?
Yeah, love mind maps. Yeah.
What is your favorite tool for mind maps, if I don't?
I've just been using Google Draw, and it's been working pretty well. I'm not like a hardcore mind map user. I use it because I can segment my thoughts and then kind of like circle back to whatever I've missed.
Yeah, definitely. When I was planning out my social strategy, I started trying to write it out and I couldn't get it to work as a list, so to speak. I was like, okay, let's go to like some kind of tool I can use to map it out. And the moment I was able to do that, just be able to visualize it, like you're saying, made a world of difference.
Exactly.
So one of your things on Instagram, you have these story highlights, the meditations. You talk about observing your emotions. What are things that you like to do so? Or like meditation is good for reflection, but what kind of things can you do in the moment?
That's a great question. So what I do is I always observe, and there's a certain amount of detachment that is involved in observing your emotions. It's almost like you are looking at yourself in third person, and you need to observe like the room and like what you're feeling, and then make decisions based on that after you've had like a chance to dwell on it. But yeah, it's really just kind of getting out of your head and back into your body.
Yeah, definitely. And it's interesting how with emotions too, people often don't realize they're feeling something in that given moment. Like anger can crop up so quickly. It can sprout out and grow rapidly. And even some smaller emotions, I say smaller, but like happiness and sadness don't necessarily change quickly, but they're still very powerful in that way. So being able to identify, like you're saying, what emotions that you're feeling, let alone in retrospective or in future thought, like what feelings do you think I'm going to get? But in that moment, like you're saying too, that's good.
Yeah.
Is there any kind of tools or breath techniques you like to use?
Yeah, so there are 2. So there's the Shungjen meditation. You can actually look them up online, and they have free courses and everything that you can take to actually study meditation. There's also this one that my friend taught me. His name's Shay. Basically, it's this like intense, like I'll just demonstrate. It's like that, and basically you do that for like a minute or 2, and at that point it might feel a little painful. It just feels uncomfortable, but then it really just like separates your mind into like different distinct buckets. It's pretty interesting. It's a good clarity exercise.
It looks almost exactly like the Wim Hof method.
I'm not familiar with that, but it could be that method.
So Wim Hof is known as like the Iceman. Using his breathing techniques and mental models, he's able to walk in the Arctic in just a swimsuit, and even going under the water, resisting the cold, resisting diseases from what some studies have even shown through this breathing method. And it's interesting how what you just did there, that breathing, like that, it basically simulated exactly what I've seen him do.
Gotcha.
Really cool.
Yeah.
I've done it myself too, and it's one of those things where you said painful, but it's almost like a tingling sensation, that kind of flushing of the system.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like all this oxygen all of a sudden, your system's like, all right, time to circulate. Yeah.
Yeah. So one thing, kind of pivoting a little bit there, from San Francisco to Austin, Texas, and I think even New York, you've been all over the U.S. What are some of your favorite places?
So each place has a character that is really, really unique. I mean, the hustle of New York, there's really nothing quite like it. San Francisco has a very specific vibe. I grew up in San Jose, actually, and even that is like worlds different than San Francisco. There's all these little microcultures that I really appreciate everywhere. Austin is something special, though. I mean, I have felt an energy here, an electricity that I haven't felt anywhere else. And that's what kind of like has cemented me here in a way, you know?
That's amazing. One thing I really have talked to some other people about is that there's two places in the world I've always wanted to go to or move to, and that's Singapore and Austin, Texas. So it's crazy that you say that there's this like electricity. I've always kind of felt that there might be there because of the techies and the mindset of the people there. So what would you suggest for someone moving there?
So when someone moves, finding a place to stay and finding a job is somewhat the same like method, right? But finding an interesting peer group is something that is a little bit more nuanced. And I think my advice for that would be to explore everything. Go everywhere. Experience everything before you find a connector that can introduce you to everyone else you might want to know. And specifically look for very connected people, and they will basically shape your network. Yeah.
That's very interesting that you say that too. And I'm not trying to talk about myself too much because it's about you today, but one thing I really love is exploring. When I went to San Diego, one of the first things I did was explore the entire, I went to Coronado next to it, but the entire peninsula of that area. And it's interesting how you're saying to not only explore, but also find people. And one of the earlier episodes of this podcast is talking about a super connector, someone that you go to in order to find someone new. You might actually really like that episode because what Nate in the episode was talking about is that one person, like when you have a problem or if you need something, if you need to find somebody, there's someone that you go to, whoever that person is, that's a super connector. So what you're saying is to go find one.
Yes, exactly. Find the super connector.
Maybe you're one for there too. All right. Once again, kind of going back to your stories, I really liked going into those highlights there. You were doing some swimming, right? And you say that you got your butt handed to you from all those laps in your own words. I've been a swim instructor for years. Is there anything you have, like any questions you might have?
That's a good question. I like to classify myself as a strong swimmer, but strong very quickly turns into incredibly fast and disoriented. So I'm like, I can get from point A to point B incredibly quickly, but I can't get there efficiently. So I guess, what is your, I think my hypothesis is that most of it lies in how many breaths I take along the way. So every like stroke when I'm doing freestyle, I'm like taking a breath, which slows me down, I believe. So I guess in terms of that, what are your suggestions?
Yeah, I would really love to help. And so one of the biggest things I notice is, are you a marathoner or a sprinter, like muscle wise?
Sprinter.
Okay, so some people, their muscles react quickly and they want to move quicker. And so their muscles will actually react quicker. And so when you're in the water, that's probably why you're swimming so quickly. I'm the same way. There's other people who are needing to go slower, and that's just how their muscles feel more natural. And so depending on your type, that'll make things a little bit different. And then, like you said, breathing every time is slowing you down. usually what I say is when you're doing a breathing stroke, it's about 50% speed going forward. Maybe not so much with freestyle or front crawl, but with like breaststroke especially. And so usually you want to try to take as little breath as possible, work on the lungs kind of longevity. So you almost need to go like a marathoner and try to do either multiple laps more than you might normally do at a slower pace, or do your normal laps with less breathing, even though the oxygen, the carbon dioxide is building up. So usually that panicking notion that people are feeling is not because they need to breathe in, but it's more because they need to breathe out. And so if you can hold your breath until you get to the point where you're like, okay, I'm about to panic, breathe out underwater and stay underwater. Don't come up just yet. That'll make you go farther.
Gotcha. So it's really working on that lung capacity as well as the almost patience throughout it. Yeah. Okay.
I could go on for hours about a lot of that stuff. So you can always pick my brain if you feel like it, but I'll go ahead and move on a bit there unless you have anything else. But one thing we were also talking about beforehand is monitors. I saw in one of your pictures that you have an ultra-wide monitor, and that always piques my interest. What do you think has helped you in software engineer or just as a techie in general with that extra real estate?
So I typically don't like multiple monitors because the context switching is just too much. And I only really bring up my laptop when I'm on a video call. So the ultra-wide monitor really helps with comparing documents. Like I have a terminal here and I have my code here, or when I'm doing like Polymath design stuff, I have like Illustrator open and maybe like a chat window to figure out like what my copywriter's thinking of this. But it really helps like keep the context stationary, without too many like screen switches, because then I'll have like a YouTube video up here or something. I'll be like, this is like too much, just too much to focus on. Yeah.
Do you ever find yourself rotating it so you can have a longer IDE?
I've thought of it, but something about it's too, like, that monitor would just have to be used for that. Otherwise, I'd have to keep switching it back when I do other things. And I'm just like, I don't know, maybe. I've done it a few times. I'm not totally in love with it, though.
Maybe just a normal 16:9 vertical or something like that. But so I like how you're talking about focus too. And considering that Polymath is all about productivity, focus and productivity really go hand in hand. What do you find yourself doing to stay focused?
Right. So staying focused is, so let me ask for some clarification. Is it focus, like how to focus on things, like tools to focus, or how do I stay focused?
Let's say the latter. How do you personally like to stay focused?
I like to stay focused by shutting out every distraction and like forcing myself to only worry about one problem. Like one problem at a time and just solve it. Like I have it, so if you just focus on one thing at a time, you're able to really get like the whole context of the problem. Then the solution almost presents itself. But it's because we have all these extra external things that are distracting. It's like there's a book on my desk. I might want to read it. I got a notification. Like, oh, let me pull up Instagram. Like all of these different things, But yeah, shutting out everything really helps. And I don't even do that for that long. I do it like in 50-minute blocks. I'm like, all I'm going to do right now is design the new Polymath PDF. And that's it. So don't worry about anything else, and it goes a lot faster.
I like it. It sounds quite a lot like deep work, or even the Pomodoro technique, where you're focusing just purely on one thing for 45 minutes, 50 minutes, or whatever time span, or just even deep work, which lasts for a few hours, but just simply focusing on that one task, make sure you get it done, that kind of thing.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, I read Cal Newport's book, Deep Work, and that kind of, I love his work because he always pulls upon like articles and actually has evidence and backs everything up. I'm like, okay, I can believe this now. And I tried it and it worked. And I'm like, all right, man, fair enough. I'll take the method and I'll use it. I'll run with it.
Where do you see stuff like that, like deep work, Pomodoro, or is it Pomodoro? I always say it wrong.
Pomodoro.
Okay. Where do you see those kind of techniques coming into play with like GetPolymath, the Polymath productivity planner?
I let people use their time as however they wish, like however they want to block out certain things. My only request of Polymath customers is that they utilize every hour of their day, where they're like not looking back at the end of the day and they're like, wow, I regret hours 3 to 6 where I just like laid around on my bed and then went over to my couch and sat there. Like that kind of stuff is like, that is not a great use of time. But if you used it to, I don't know, read or like study something or learn something else or create something wonderful, then I'm like, go for it. But how they want to segment out those individual tasks is kind of up to them.
Interesting. Why don't we kind of go over just an overview of what Polymath is?
Sure.
Not the topic per se, like the actual subject of polymathy, but your product.
Right. So the Polymath Planner is a physical planner here, and basically there's only 2 or 3 things that I feel very dogmatic about, and that is managing your time and then iterative development.
Yeah.
So managing your time is kind of straightforward. And I kind of touched on it earlier, is schedule out everything you're going to do in your day in a place that is distraction free, where you're not getting notifications from anything and you can actually focus and like, okay, what did I do today? What did I actually accomplish? Because there have been times in my past where I would go to sleep. I'm like, what the heck did I do? Like, did I do anything today? And that would really bother me. Mm-hmm. So there's that in terms of time management. But iterative development is how can we get just 2 or 3% better every day, either by fine tuning our morning routine, changing what we eat for lunch, going on a walk, exercising in the morning and the evening, taking a break, and I don't know, having like walking over to a coffee shop and grabbing a coffee or something. Like, what can we do to incrementally add value to our lives? And after we're kind of done adding value to our lives, where we're at a state where we can perform, we then start to think about how can we provide for others, and how can we make their day just 1 or 2% better. Yeah, it's a wealth thing, right? Like you help one person, and that's
pay it forward.
Yeah, pay it forward.
Yeah, it's very compassionate, and like you can't really help anybody else until you get your stuff together too.
Exactly.
You know, one thing it really resonated with me with is that there's a term I coined called self-edutainment. So a lot of people look at self-development and think it's a whole branching path, but there's a lot of areas where it can be broken down to different sub-niches: self-education, self-development, self-improvement. And when I talk about self-edutainment, it kind of has that whole trifecta where self-education is kind of more the baseline. Self-improvement is the consistency, that 1%, 2% every day getting better, like you were saying. And then the self-development, which is almost like an exponential catalyst factor. So it seems that like, how do you quantify that percentage of improvement every day?
How do you quantify it? So the easy, I'd say, baseline way to quantify it is, did you actually make any measurable progress towards your weekly goals? So I kind of have this cascading goal thing where you have like 3 intentions for the month. Those are then broken down to 5 goals per week. And you don't have to do this like at the beginning of the month. You do it like every week as it grows. And then you do goals every day. And the question is, did you actually hit those targets? And if you didn't, why not? And how can we improve for the next time? But a more subtle approach is, how did you feel about accomplishing those goals? Like, did it feel good to do it? And if it didn't, why not? Because it should feel good, right? It should feel good to make progress towards something you're passionate about.
Yeah. And if you don't really feel good about it, you might reevaluate if it actually is a passion or not.
Precisely.
How long do the planners last? Do they have an expiration date, like only a year?
So each planner is 5 weeks. And there are a number of reasons for that. One is I don't really feel like carrying around a year-long planner for the entire year. You know, everything has like a wear and tear, and everyone likes getting new packages in the mail. So there's that kind of like reward system that I've kind of built in. Also, I get to build a relationship with these people over time. So every Polymath customer gets a handwritten note from me and a 30-minute phone call just to say like, hey, let's touch base. How are you doing? How can I help you? Those kinds of things.
I didn't know that. Even when I was looking at your website, I didn't see it came with a call. That's good to know. then I guess we can also, just in case anyone's curious listening in, how much does a planner cost?
Yeah, so a single buy planner is $25, and then the subscription is 15.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you have that kind of almost multiple models there. Now, when it comes to planning your productivity, is there caveats to, what's the word I'm looking for? Accountability?
Are there caveats to it? How do you mean?
So like, what if you do fail? Like, what if you got in a whole planner and just, even though you follow the techniques to it, which I feel like if you follow techniques to the planner and productivity in general, you should be successful in some degree. But like, let's say hypothetically, there's one person who's not successful at all for some reason or other. Either they weren't accountable to themselves or to the planner. How can they either get out of that rut, or was there something wrong with the planner? What's the situation?
Right. So I would immediately point to this theoretical person's intentions.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what are your intentions going into this month? Is it to work out more? Is it to, I don't know, learn a new topic? Is it to practice guitar? Something like that. And I would really dive into the why. Like, why are you doing this? Because if it's something like, I want to drop ship supplements to make more money.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say, okay. And then at the end of the month, if they didn't do any of that, I'd be like, okay, why is it that you had all this enthusiasm going into it and you had no enthusiasm at the end of the month? So my question is, A, what changed? And B, maybe there's something fundamental about that intention that you need to do some more reflection on. Yeah. And like really understand like what is the core motivations for this thing.
Really meditate on it, kind of like what you mentioned earlier. Really reflect. Yeah. I love it. Thanks for doing that thought experiment with me. So one thing that I really love is you said entrepreneurship is a battle between you and yourself. What do you mean by that? And what do you think could be the greatest takeaway from that?
Yeah. So some of our greatest battles are between us and ourselves. And what I mean by that is the conscious mind and the unconscious mind. Mm-hmm. And to an extent, it could also be the authentic self and the self that is inauthentic, the ego. Mm-hmm. So how can we like combat that? I think that requires a lot of self-awareness. It's really like you have to be present and aware. And I think the combination of those things then leads into self-awareness of like, how am I actually doing this? And one of my high school teachers said this, and I didn't understand it at the time, but now it makes so much sense. It's not what you do, it's how you do it. Mm-hmm. And that, like, and understanding that really just changed the game, because it was the intention, it was the clarity, it was the purpose, it was the your willpower to get it done. And yeah, I mean, entrepreneurship, I guess, is the battle between what you think you want and what you actually want. Mm-hmm. You know, like you could think that like originally, I thought I was going to sell a bunch of products. I was going to be, okay, like I'm really passionate about espresso machines. I'm really passionate about like really well-designed products that are intentional and last a long time and are like conscious and all these things, right? So I thought that was the way the business was going to go. And the planner was just like an entry point. But then I was like, wait, and for a while I was kind of fighting that idea. I didn't actually like pivot into like, oh, let's just focus on the plan. You know, let's get this one done and sold in a way that is like the right way.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's this like constant like, where do you want to take this, and where should you actually take this? You know, it's the battle against your ego. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think there's two takeaways from that too. It's almost a balance between the conscious mind and the subconscious mind, like you said. And one thing you like kind of resonated quite a bit is that you said your teacher said this, but it's actually something I've said quite a lot as a swim instructor. It's not about where, like the point, going from point A to point B doesn't matter. It's how you get there, how you're swimming in that lap. Like we mentioned earlier for the freestyle, is Like, what steps are you taking to make sure you're not panicking? What steps are you taking to make sure you're breathing properly, like we were mentioning earlier? How is your stroke doing? Are you overly pulling? Are you overly kicking? Not kicking enough? Are you sinking? Those different dynamics of how you swim greatly impact how well or how fast or even if you get to the point B, the end wall. And so I think that kind of analogy really goes well with what you were saying as well.
Absolutely. I have a quote in the Polymath planner that I'll just spoil for all the listeners, but it's what you get by achieving your goals is not as important as what you become by achieving your goals.
Mm-hmm.
Johann Wolfgang von Goethe. That is the essence of the Polymath planner.
It's about the person you become.
Yeah. It's not all that you accomplish. It's who you become at the end of this.
Yeah, I love it. One thing actually I think that this is a good point to ask is that something I ask all my guests actually is, what is a polymath to you?
A polymath. So there's this like misconception that you have to be really great at all these things. You know, it's like the jack of all trades. And I got that a lot. I was like, oh, but you're not like an expert in anything. But I think that's kind of false. I think a polymath is someone that can integrate knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
They can take what they've learned in a completely different setting and apply it to what they're doing now. And it's that integration of knowledge that is very powerful, especially in the modern economy, where you are basically expected to be able to do all these different things. And if you can't, or you don't know how, or you don't know how to learn it, that becomes a serious detriment to your career.
Definitely. And it's interesting how you're mentioning too the modern economy. Someone I had just the other day, a famous entrepreneur, Sean Shepard, he was talking about how entrepreneurship is like kind of the same way, where you have to be skilled in a lot of different areas. A lot of things happen to you as an entrepreneur, as you know, where you're going to be hit with hurdles. And if you can't figure out how to learn to get past those, you're going to fail. And it's interesting how you say it's very interdisciplinary. You have to really not master, but be able to take many skills in different areas and relate them to one another to really find that innovation of sorts, but almost just, what's the word? Eureka moment.
Yeah, definitely. And actually going off that, one thing that I tell everyone is that you can have an unlimited number of interests, but be very comfortable only being known for one.
Okay.
Because, so Leonardo da Vinci, like everyone pretty much knows him as a painter first, right? And then he's like, yeah, an inventor and all these other things. Benjamin Franklin, everyone pretty much knows him as a statesman first, but he was also like he started the first like fire department, all these like other things, right? And I think that's important to note that you, at the end of time, you will only be known for one thing, maybe a collection of things, but you'll be only remembered for this like one massive triumph. Is at least the pattern that I've seen studying history.
It's interesting you say that, because to me that almost sounds like disappointing. Like, I think to anybody really too. And it kind of hit me a little too close to home, because I was like, oh, I want to be known for all these different things. But history doesn't really work that way, as you're saying.
Unfortunately, it does not.
And I really kind of bouncing off to a couple of your previous points too, is I see polymathy as almost like a scale. You have jack of all trades, but as the saying goes, if you're a jack of all trades, you're a master of none. And I think that's a little bit misconstrued, because a lot of people think that if you're a jack of all trades, it's a waste of time. But like you were saying earlier, that interdisciplinary knowledge in all these different areas is very important for being able to find the bridges between those two knowledge pools. And I think after that, a generalist is someone who's a little bit more skilled in these areas. And then you have various different levels of kind of polymathy in a way, but then an actual polymath is someone who's very skilled in multiple areas, but like you said, only really known for one.
Like history will remember you as one thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. I think that's a very crucial point, and it's one of the reasons why I like doing this show too, because I get to see those external point of views that really make us grow.
Yeah, it's very sobering.
Yeah, definitely sobering. That's the right way to put it. So Da Vinci is my polymath hero. Who is yours?
I have a few. Okay, I'll say Benjamin Franklin for the true, as a true polymath.
Mm-hmm.
But a personal hero of mine is Otto von Bismarck.
Okay.
And I don't know if you're familiar with him. He was the first chancellor of the German Empire. So he basically helped Kaiser Wilhelm I unified Germany.
Hmm.
And this is like in the late 1800s. And effectively what he did was he aligned with all the right, so like Prussia, right? That was like the biggest German state at the time. He helped the Kaiser basically align with all the other German states, and he declared like 3 wars or something: a war with Denmark, a war with Austria, and a war with France. And they somehow won all of them, and boom, that's modern Germany as we kind of know it.
Huh.
Until like a bunch of other things happened, and
Yeah.
that kind of fell apart. But yeah, I just really liked. I think I liked his speeches.
Mm-hmm.
I think I loved the way he A, commanded language, B, understood strategy, and C, had this like overarching purpose of like a unified Germany with Prussia at its head.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and he like basically he accomplished that because he didn't take no for an answer. He's like, I'm gonna find a way to do this.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an interesting hero for sure, but definitely a number of virtues there.
Yeah, I'll be excited to look him up later. Sprechen Sie Deutsch?
9.
So I guess you just looked at an English translation then?
Yeah.
Yeah, so would I. I don't
Yeah.
I know a few words in German, that's it. I just like being able to ask people if they speak German. And then they'll talk back to me in German. I'm like, oh, yeah, sorry. Then who would you say is like a modern polymath? Besides maybe like Elon Musk or something like that.
Right, yeah, so that was going to be my answer there.
Called you right out there, huh?
Yeah, man, that's like, you can't, which one is a modern polymath? But you can't pick the obvious answer.
Yeah.
It's a great question. Okay, now that I can't pick Elon Musk, I'm going to have to think about that one.
That's fine. We could always cut out the long pause later if we need to, or
Yeah,
get in there just for the sake of entertainment for our guests.
Naval Ravikant.
Naval Ravikant. Okay, please do explain.
Yeah. So he is he's basically an investor, and he has this incredible way with business that, so he applies this like rule book that he plays by when he does business. But more importantly, that same rule book is then translated on how to live life. And I think the biggest thing with polymaths, or at least something that polymaths could definitely benefit from, is a heightened level of clarity. And that's kind of what the planner does. Like, productivity and organization aside, it really gives you clarity.
Yeah.
Into your intentions. And I think Naval Ravikant, he is able to really cut out everything else except what absolutely needs to be done. And he has this like, I don't know, the JRE podcast, he went on with Joe Rogan. You gotta listen to that, because this man is like truly gifted.
Yeah.
I read he had like a Twitter book, and I read it. It was called How to Become Wealthy Without Getting Lucky.
Huh.
And it was mind blowing. He said that there are 2 games played. One is a wealth game, which is not zero sum, it's positive sum. So if I get more wealthy and I help you, then you get more wealthy. So everyone can get more wealthy. So there's an unlimited amount of wealth to be brought around. But there's also this game called status, where status is zero sum. And as a result, like, if you win status over me, then you win, I lose. And that's not necessarily a great game to play if we're playing this sort of conscious and mindful business.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he's incredibly powerful, thought leader for sure.
Definitely. I'll be happy to look him up, and I'll try to leave a link in the description too. It reminds me of game theory in a way, where you're balancing out win-win scenarios or lose-lose, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it's interesting how I'm going to probably do the same thing as you. We're talking about a modern polymath, because when you were thinking about yours, I was thinking about someone who I've seen recently, Kevin Hart. And a lot of people see him as just a comedian. Like you were saying earlier, he's only known for that one thing, but he's been an actor, he's been a comedian, he's been a hustler, he's been selling some kind of product line too, I think, at some point. And just the way that he approaches life and how he approaches his actions is very polymathic and even stoic. And it's just interesting how you're mentioning the investor. Is that a hero of yours, the reason why you got into investing?
No, actually, I in high school, I dated this girl, and her dad was heavy into investing. And I kept track of like the stock markets for some reason. There was something in me that was like, I need to pay attention to this for some reason. I don't know why. But then once I like started chatting with him, he kind of took me under his wing and like taught me everything that I needed to know to become an effective investor. So I read the book, The Intelligent Investor by Benjamin Graham. And that's pretty much the only absolutely necessary book you must read.
No Rich Dad, Poor Dad?
Well, that's more like personal finance and like wealth preservation, but like solely investing on how to value solid stocks and good companies and things like that. The Intelligent Investor. Rich Dad Poor Dad's great. Don't get me wrong, love the book, changed my life. But if there's one book that you would have to read on investing, and you wanted to be a serious either personal or institutional investor, you must read The Intelligent.
And it's interesting how someone was able to take you under your wing, and maybe we'll have to make an episode one day. I take it under his wing, not your wing, but do an episode one day about investing.
Yeah, absolutely. Naval Ravikant has this whole philosophy around it, and that's something else that I really have to dive into. He's a wealth of knowledge, honestly. Yeah, investing is a vast topic with lots of nuances and is always interesting. So,
well, and it's interesting how if we get into like the really macro view of specialties versus polymath, like monomath versus polymath, it's almost like even if you get a specialty, like you're a doctor in this one specific field, there's always going to be these subfields that you could delve into as well. So you almost need a polymath mindset in a specialty like investing to really understand all the nuances to each of these little areas.
Yeah, precisely. I mean, I think investing is one of the things that like it really brings out that polymathic mindset, because like Warren Buffett believes that you shouldn't invest in companies that you don't understand. And if you're going to invest in, like, there's so many companies out there that you have to have knowledge of processes, of like technology, of healthcare, of pharmaceuticals, like the whole 9 yards, because it just doesn't fit that method of Warren Buffett's like strategy, in which I 100% agree. Like, you should know the companies that you invest in. You should know their businesses and strategies and whatnot. So,
yeah. Research into who's there, how they're doing things, and that kind of thing. Kind of pivoting just a little bit, we were talking about earlier about how we both know polymathy is about it's not just about mastery, but it's also not just being a generalist or jack of all trades. You're not going to be at either scale per se. Where do you see a lot of misconceptions about polymaths, and how does that affect the polymath planner?
So the number one thing that I get with this planner is that they don't know what the name polymath is, but it's cool because it's a polymath planner. That is a word that they don't really know. They haven't used it, so they think it's like something to do with math, and a lot of math. And I don't really correct them immediately. I allow my content to sort of define the word without explicitly defining it.
Okay.
Right. So that's why I post stories of like philosophers, quotes, a bunch of different people. So like artists, authors, poets, engineers, scientists, the whole 9 yards, because I think it's more fun to give people context and let them build a meaning behind it.
Yeah.
Because then it's something unique to them. I mean, I could go out there and be like, oh, a polymath is someone that has a wide variety of knowledge in a number of subjects. And then everyone's like, okay, great. That was the most boring definition I've ever heard in my life. And they'd be right. So I'd much rather have them kind of come up with their own definition based on context that I've given them.
Yeah, I think that's really great. You know, it's funny that you say it in that way, because I legitimately made my own documentation and like a glossary, and I defined what a polymath was, at least in my own words too, along with a little Wikipedia snippet. And so it's just interesting how like I like that context idea that you're saying. And that's kind of what I'm trying to do with the show too. Get people like you. I mean, you're very polymathic and even use that word for your own brand, but even people who come on here are just entrepreneurs. They can still have that same polymathic mindset, but not necessarily call themselves a polymath. And having people like you who are smart and capable and able to share knowledge well, I think that really kind of gives people different context sources.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Absolutely.
kind of going on it. How can someone gain more clarity through context?
Brilliant question. Probably two of my favorite words, clarity and context. How can people gain clarity through context? So context kind of just paints the outlines of the picture. You know, it's like a blurred image. And clarity gives you that, all the details that you need. Knowing the larger picture is very valuable because we can often, like, extremely focused people get very much in their head.
Yeah.
And when you're in your head, you sink because you are playing ping pong with your emotions. Basically, it's like your brain versus your unconscious versus your unconscious versus your conscious self, like playing ping pong, and you're in the middle getting beaten up. And being able to like really just take yourself out of that situation and understanding like your intention, your purpose, the overarching purpose of your existence is very valuable, because then all of these little things that like bother us, like for instance, today I spilled some coffee on the ground, and normally like 10 years ago, that would have really bothered me. I'd be like, oh man, this day's gonna be awful. But now it's like, it doesn't matter. It's the least of my worries. And now I have an opportunity to clean it up, or whatever, you know, that it's that kind of mindset as opposed to that this is a disaster.
Glass half full, half empty.
Yeah, exactly. And then getting that clarity is important because you need it before you take action. And I think very often people switch it. It's action and then they get clarity. And if you live life like that, you'll constantly be either running in circles or wondering why you aren't further than you are. And trust me, you can go a lot faster when you know where you're going than you do if you don't know where you're going and you're just doing.
Yeah. Almost kind of going back to the swimming context, like how you're taking action without thinking about it too much.
Right. So I'm like, I've been taught how to swim, therefore I will swim from here to there. And during the process, I'm like, okay. And I was going for like laps and calories and like all those kinds of things. But yeah, the swimming is definitely a great analogy for all of this.
Well, and it's like you're saying too, finding that purpose in life almost in a way. And it's kind of like finding that why so that you know what actions you need to take. Because if you don't have that clarity on your why, or even just where you want to be in life, then you can't understand the context of your actions or the situations around you. By proxy, then, how can someone gain clarity on life? I really like picking your brain here because you're coming out with a lot of great responses.
How can someone gain clarity on life?
I guess we're getting really philosophical today.
Yeah, I mean, I'm all for it. I love philosophy. I think you truly don't know that you lack clarity until you've muddled in confusion. Until you've had that feeling of like lostness, of just like complete misdirection, and you just have no idea where you're going, you don't really realize you need it. So, and there's a case to be made that yes, some people should experience that because they will know how it feels to not have direction. And to actually get clarity in life, I think that requires the right questions to be asked. And this kind of falls into the whole polymath thing again, where it's really not about what you can learn. It's really about what are the right questions to ask? Because we have Google, and Google works by asking it the right question. If you don't ask it the right question, you'll get some random information back, and you're like, this is useless to me. So there's that. And the way you ask the right question is by connecting with other people like yourself, people, whether that is on a podcast, and really diving into what they're talking about, and then bringing that back to apply to your own life. Spending time alone, spending time understanding your core values. Have you seen the movie? Oh man, now I'm forgetting it. It was like a Pixar movie with all these like different feelings.
Oh, the Emotions movie, whatever it was called. But yeah,
that movie. So they had these like there were these like pillars, these like core something or others that like were falling over. I don't know if you remember that.
I haven't seen it, but I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, but effectively, you need to figure out what those are
Uh-huh.
because those are the things that motivate you.
Yeah.
And I did the exercise, and I came up with 3 things that motivated me, and that was beauty, elegance, and logic.
Ooh.
I will work for free if the project has all 3 of those things because it's fun for me.
Yeah.
It's something that's like it excites me. Like I'm renovating this 4-plex, and that really requires all 3 to really get a solid project or a solid product at the end of this whole thing. Because you have to redesign the kitchen. It has to look good because this is eventually going to be rented out. So I don't want just like the whole thing, like it's not what you do, it's how you do it. I could just put like random like appliances, like mismatched cabinets, and it would be like, yes, this is a functional kitchen, but is it really representative of what I want it to become?
Mm-hmm. It seems like those are your core values in life.
Yeah, definitely.
I love it. And it's you stand for quality in a way. You want to make sure that if you have the capacity to do something, you're going to do it right.
100%. I'm like all in or not at all because there's really no point in doing anything unless it can be done right.
Yeah. Kind of balancing off that idea, one of my core values is balance. And I think that you would resonate with that quite a bit. Specifically, one thing I really talked about a lot in the past, especially with an old blog, was balance between philosophy and technology, science and ideology.
Mm-hmm.
I think that there's a lot of intersection between the two, and there's a lot to be learned from that. Without going too much into that, you were talking about pillars. And there's actually a concept that I talk about a lot, that I created a philosophy, so to speak, for life, for self-development. It's called the 4 Pillars philosophy. It kind of takes back ideas from like the 4 areas of yoga and some Greek styles and just all kinds of different philosophies around the world, where there's 4 major aspects of life. You have the mind, the body, spirit, and emotions. Each one of these pillars greatly affects one another, and how they are affecting each other is very important to understand. So like you were saying, if you have that trifecta for your particular principles in life, that's what's really driving you forward. Without your trifecta really coming together, without that apartment really having that high quality, there's not much point in working on either one of those 3 pillars and your principles, right? But you still want to have all 3, and you can't do all 3 without working them all individually.
Right. Yeah, they kind of all have to be done,
right?
Yeah, all at the same time, to really like build into that vision.
So where do you see that philosophy kind of coming into play for self-development, or even in a productivity planner like yours? How can someone take that 4 aspects of life to heart?
Mm-hmm. I mean, I really resonate with this. This has a lot to do with, I feel like, mental health almost. Mm-hmm. And if you like, everyone struggles with things, so there's no shame in struggling. And I'm a huge proponent of like, fix your mental first before you do anything else. Because then if you start building something on a shaky foundation, it's gonna collapse.
Yeah.
And I'm a part of my friend's group called Guy Talk, and it's basically like a men's mental health just like community. And he has really crushed it. The things that play into that same kind of mission are what you've outlined here. Having balance between your mind, body, spirit, and emotions. Yeah, I mean, everything really just needs to be aligned. Yeah. Before you can really like realize your purpose and kind of like elevate your consciousness, you need those 4 things. That's like fundamental. And I'm certainly, I don't want to say like, oh, I'm elevated consciousness or whatever, but like, like I'm still working on emotions and definitely mind, like there are things that everyone is working on. And I think these are all valuable. These are all very good tenets for that. I'd be interested to read your whole philosophy.
Yeah, I want to make a manifesto at some point with it, and especially create maybe even a course around it as well. At the current point, it's really only blog posts, podcasts, and videos that I've delved into it a little bit. But yeah, I'm happy to talk to you about it more. And if I see it in the Polymath planner, I'll call you up. Be like, hey, where's my money? No, I was kidding. No, but it's interesting because, like you said, having that foundation. And some people often focus too much on one or the other. So someone might focus too much on spirituality, but then they don't necessarily are focused enough on eating right or making sure they exercise consistently or even maintaining a mental state. So if someone's spiritual, generally they have a pretty good idea of balance. And I've seen that in the past, but sometimes people get confused for spirituality with religion, and they don't necessarily understand it. Regardless of what religion you believe in and partake in, there's still that balance of spirituality that's separated. One thing I like to view it as is the balance between the subconscious and conscious mind, like we were talking about earlier. That's how I really kind of view spirituality, is that balance between the two and a connection between the two.
100%. Yeah, spirituality is one of those topics that it's really what you want it to be, you know? And in my opinion, you're free to do whatever you want to kind of discover and uncover that, because everyone works differently. Like I'll be the first one to tell you that the Polymath planner does not fit everyone.
Mm-hmm.
It only fits a specific type of person. And similarly, like there is no one size fits all solution to spirituality or healing your mind or your emotions or your body or anything like that. So yeah, that is powerful. Cool.
So kind of talking about purpose earlier as well, you seem rather clear in some of the endeavors you are wanting to take. What is something you've always known you would do?
I always knew I was going to start my own business.
Yeah.
I always knew it. I was entrepreneurial from like 4th grade.
Yeah.
And one thing I did was there was a snack cart that came around. My mom was a teacher at the school, so me and my sister, we stayed a little later so that she would finish up whatever. And the snack cart would come around, and I'd say there was about maybe $30 or $40 worth of snacks in there. So what I did, as any entrepreneurial kid does, is I brought $50 to school and I bought all the snacks.
This dude.
And I increased the prices by 15 to 10%, or 10 to 15%. And I made 10 to 15% that day. And I was feeling really good. I was like, wow, this could work.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know how I got that idea.
How you got away with it too?
Or how I got away with it. I don't know why the teachers let this happen, but it did. And yeah, I mean, yeah, I always had this vision of start my own company. And I wasn't like a stellar student, you know, I wasn't like top of the class. I was good enough to like get by and like excel in certain topics. Like my biggest thing, the number one subject I was across the board always good at was history. And then a close second was math. And then after that, English. And then science was kind of down here.
Yeah. I
just didn't care. Like, I'm like, it's great. I have an appreciation for it, but I don't care about it as much as these other things.
Yeah.
And yeah, I like listen to science and I respect science, and
you're a software engineer, so like.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I let the scientists do the science, and I will do the coding.
Yeah.
Trust me. Yeah, that's
It's interesting. I totally jive with you on that. For my 9th birthday, so basically the same age there, I told my family I wanted office supplies because I wanted to be a businessman. And then like
staplers and color or pencil.
Yeah,
here we go.
Yeah, basically. And just like a few years later, I was like, I'm going to be a CEO. Like someone would ask me, like, hey, what do you want to be when you grow up? CEO.
Yeah, right.
What was your answer when people said, like, was it just entrepreneur or businessman?
Yeah. I had this thing in like 5th grade, I think. So when my like personality was really developing, I would draw, like whenever there's like some drawing assignment or whatever, I'd put RM Industries, and at the time, complete ego trip.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, that'd be great. You know, we do all sorts of stuff. Like, I don't know. I had this like, that was what I wanted, and I wanted to like run it.
Yeah.
And I wanted it to be big and amazing. Yeah. So CEO, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. Same thing as me. And you know, it's funny that you say that, because when I was a kid, I called my company Musty Co. because my name is Dustin, which a lot of people called me Dusty back in the day. I don't like that, but like it's funny how it happened, and then I just changed the word like Musty Co, which is an ego trip, like you were saying. And it's just like, it's funny how there's a lot of similarities.
Yeah. There's I feel like a lot of entrepreneurs like have that thing. They've always wanted to do it, or there were signs like early on that they were going to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Speaking on this point, I think that I want to kind of address the audience real quick. Is that for me and Ranjit here, we talked about how we always kind of had a picture of where we wanted to go. We had that business plan idea, like, hey, we want to be a CEO. And a lot of people have a hard time finding their purpose or why or where they want to go. And people get discouraged when people like us kind of already knew that from a while back. But through experimentation or trying to get hit in the face, kind of like what you were saying earlier, like getting muddled around with certain topics, if you can try to find your why through something like that, or find whatever passion you felt throughout life and work towards that, that's a good way to find that particular purpose or clarity on your life.
Absolutely. And don't think that there aren't opportunities out there.
Mm-hmm.
The world is abundant with opportunities. Your favorite hobby can become an incredible business.
Yeah.
Like you can do that because of all the opportunities. I do an abundance meditation in the morning where I listen to a particular frequency and I kind of meditate on just being grateful for like I'm here. I have just unlimited resources, like opportunities endless. I can do whatever I want. I get to meet with amazing people. I got to talk about incredibly intelligent things. Like I do that every morning because it funnels more of that to me.
Yeah.
So I encourage everyone else to do that too.
You set your intention. Is that with the alpha wave beats?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting because you're the culmination of the 5 closest people to you. And if you are trying to attract people, if you want to go into the law of attraction kind of mentality, if you want to attract people in your life that are going to bring you up, you have to set your intention like you're doing, that abundance mindset. Yes. First thing.
100%. 100%, man. And I have this so I guess going back to the always knowing what you wanted thing, I had this vision earlier that it was all about me. And somewhere along the line, that completely changed. And I had the mindset before that I was like, how can others and other things serve me? Mm-hmm. And now I've completely 180'd, and now it's all about how can I serve others? Like, how can I best serve you on your journey? That's what I say to a lot of people. I merely look at myself as a servant of others because I have just unlimited amounts of capacity, let's say. What you can do now with the internet is insane. You can affect millions of people. And yeah, it blows my mind, the amount of opportunity out there.
Totally. And it's interesting how you mentioned that 180. My favorite person, my hero, like we said earlier, the Leonardo da Vinci, one of his biographies by Walter Isaacson, something that's pretty well talked about for that particular person. He was doing a podcast or a keynote, something, I don't remember exactly what it was. I was listening to it as a podcast. He was talking about how the difference between a genius and someone who is just really good, or a polymathic in a way. And one of the things is that a lot of geniuses fail because they just do it for themselves, or they're too isolated. Like you said, if you're really focusing on something too much, you're going to get stuck in your own head, and there's going to be a downward spiral. You're going to get too panicky or concerned or whatever the word would be. And so the geniuses that actually prevailed, like Benjamin Franklin and even Leonardo da Vinci, was able to keep people around him, like the Medicis, who were able to support him financially. So the difference between a genius and a successful genius and a failure genius is the ones who can help as many people as possible and keep people around them and that sort of thing.
Yeah, 100%. The relationships you build, again, it's the process, is not the destination. So it's not what you do, it's how you do it. The process is building the relationships. It's nurturing throughout, because you want to be surrounded and supported by people that love and appreciate you. That's 100% the goal.
Let's kind of pivot a little bit there, because I think that really was a powerful clip. I'm going to definitely clip that out there for someone else to see. What then, considering your business acumen and interest, what were the deciding factors behind creating the Polymath Planner?
So this was actually something that I have been doing manually for a long time. My senior year of high school, I realized that I just could not do it. There were 3 or 4 projects going on at the time, and I just had to figure out a way to get them all done.
Yeah.
And all I knew was that the way I was doing it now is just not going to work, and I will fail. And basically, like, the worst case scenario would be I didn't get my Eagle Scout, I wouldn't have finished my senior project, and I wouldn't have gone to college because I wouldn't have done any of the applications. Like that, like in my mind at the time, was like this huge, monumental, like catastrophic disaster that would have happened. So basically, necessity compelled me to create a system to help me.
Yeah.
And the way I did that was I literally went to Barnes & Noble. I bought a blank dotted bullet journal, and I went home that day, and I still have the ruler, and I would use a pen, and I would literally draw out the lines every single morning to make sure that I crushed that day.
Yeah.
And that was the goal. And as I used it through college and throughout my early adult life, I kind of decided to get it printed because I think I was at like a coffee shop, and I remember this slightly. I think I'm remembering it correctly. Someone came up to me, or were like in passing or something. They're like, "Oh, that's cool," and I was like, they're like drawing something like furiously, you know. And I was like, "Huh, that is cool. Okay." And so I talked to them about it. I was like, "Hey, what do you like about this?" They're like, "Oh, it's so structured and organized. Like, have you thought about getting it printed?" And I was like, "Of course not. Otherwise," I'm like, "No." So then I kind of looked into it, and I was like, "Okay, well, if I print it, I might as well sell it." And this is like purely my design. This is something that took like 4 or 5 years to come up with.
Yeah.
And I was kind of working on it inadvertently. So that's the long answer to that question.
Well, I love it. And that's the birth of a powerful product too. If you have something that you want and you know that you can make it, let alone that like you have one person who's going to buy it, and that's going to be you, or in this case me, or something like that, then you know there's probably someone else out there looking to buy it as well. Yeah, and exactly. I really kind of resonate with that too, because you're saying it's basically like a systematic thinking tool for you, so that way you can almost brain dump in a way and have to focus more on the actual tasks, not the organizational structure of trying to do it.
Right.
And I remember back in like the senior year, kind of like what you're saying there, I was overwhelmed with how many things I wanted to do. Like I wanted to start taking courses, read books, meditate, exercise, be a better person, be more proactive in my relationships, all these different tasks that really need actual focus on micro habits. And I wasn't able to organize it until later on. If I had that back then, it probably would have made a big difference.
Yeah. I'm right there with you. I mean, it's like, I think it was James Clear that said it. Our realities are shaped by our habits, or something along those lines. Yeah, it's all these like little things, all these little decisions we make that have massive ramifications in the future.
Well, if anyone hasn't read his book, Atomic Habits, definitely go into that. But yeah,
that should be up there with The Intelligent Investor.
Yeah, definitely top tier. Well, and it's interesting too that you're mentioning like not just like this habits in general, is that your culmination of habits is what really ends up becoming the actual goals happening. Like when you look to the future at the things you want to do, what are the steps you can take to get there?
Like right now for me?
Yeah. It was more of a just kind of a cutoff line right there. I didn't have anything else to say, and I was curious to see what you were going to say back. But yeah, what about for you?
So my grand vision is to basically become an entrepreneur investor, but do it in a way that is mindful and conscious, you know, be very conscientious about everything that's existing on the planet. Like sustainability is big with me. Like I changed my diet to become more sustainable. I have altered my life to ensure that I am as close to zero waste as possible. I mean, there is waste, of course, but like not mindless waste. So there's a lot of that. And it's all these little things that really like shape us that it's like, what book are you reading? Like, what are you doing here? What are you doing there? It's all these little decisions that you can make. Do you make the decision to go on TikTok, or do you make the decision to open up a book? You know, that kind of thing.
Book something right there.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, I have a whole
Yeah.
off of there.
Yeah, and I definitely think that's a very important distinction to make. Like what actions are you taking to really accomplish that goal? So something I really wanted to get your opinion on is this modular degree framework that I'm building. Essentially, it's like a do-it-yourself education. Could be for higher education, but I do think it could be applied to even younger kids in schools if we can find a way to make it universally applicable. Like in Singapore, for example, they're using modified learning for elementary school students. They're using like AI to see, hey, is this kid getting this particular knowledge pool correct? Are they getting these skills for this new knowledge area? And I really want to be able to either use AI or real people to adjust people's frameworks. Meaning, if you want to learn about entrepreneurship, what do you need to learn first? Is there a specific sub niche? Like, hey, I want to learn more about business, not so much the operations or HR, whatever kind of thing. These education pools will branch out to different areas. And how you learn that right now is like, hey, I'm going to go on Google and search it. But it's not structured. You're not going to get a very solid understanding until you get to many, many, many Google searches later.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that is very true. So I'm definitely a fan of this of having like a modular degree system, because there are some things. Well, I guess I have two sides of this. The first side is like, yeah, there are some things that are truly pointless because they're outdated.
Mm-hmm.
It's like an archaic practice that somehow, in some way, it's still taught,
Yeah.
and it's not relevant to today. I was watching a YouTube video today, and the girl was speaking, and she was saying that, like, yeah, I got this marketing degree at Macombs, and it was completely out of date. Like, it's not applicable to what marketing is today.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, I'm 100%. I totally agree with that. Like, I think for my computer science degree, we learned two languages that were just completely out of date, didn't use them, and I haven't even touched it since. Like, it was purely an exercise for that class.
Yeah.
And that kind of stuff irks me, because it's like, we're like, everyone's effort is precious, right? Like, and we're spending all this time kind of an effort and just like attention trying to figure out something that isn't 100% applicable to future proofing our education, and that's a shame. So I think there are some things that should be traded out and other things that should be put in. So that's where I'm 100% for the modular degree. But on the other end, there's the case to be made that if you don't learn the basics, again, if you don't have a solid foundation, it is tough to build skyscrapers.
Yeah.
It's
totally agree.
tough to build. Like, if you're like, okay, like if you were me, if I was me, and I was taking this course or this like framework, and it was like my high school or whatever, and say we're in an alternate universe, right? I would have said, okay, I don't need to learn any English, and I don't need to learn that much about science. I'll study it because it's like fun to, I don't know, do stuff in chemistry, but like other than that, I'm not interested. That has completely 180 today, where now I'm like, communication is absolutely the most important thing.
Mm-hmm.
You can have the most brilliant ideas in the world, but if you can't effectively communicate them, and you can't speak to other people about them or anything, if you can't understand how people work, this whole thing is for naught. Because people really make business. Like, you can't do it alone,
Yeah.
Don't make it an island.
Well, definitely. And you have to have that kind of expression of be able to communicate with the people, like we were talking about earlier. Genius failures are the people who just aren't able to communicate it. They might have come up, you might have learned a lot about this in your computer science classes, but like some of the first inventors of various computing technologies, even a calculator, or I don't even remember, like the Turing machine, a lot of these early computers, there is some of them who created the actual concepts behind the modern computer, but they weren't accredited to it unless you actually go in a class like that actually teaches it to you. And because the reason why they're not really accredited is because they didn't connect with anybody. They never actually finished their goals, despite the fact they had the idea first. And so, like you're saying, if you're not able to communicate it, that's very important. And I think that comes down to like a network and being able to learn social skills. Kind of back on the modular degree aspect, I think that there's a very point to be made where you need to have a generalist knowledge. You need to be a jack of all trades to a certain degree. Have that width so that you can build up the skyscrapers or trees, as we said in another podcast this week. But it's interesting how you're talking same kind of thing I am.
100%. I'm all for it, man. There is a general education, let's say, that is required though. And
Yeah, I agree. Totally agree.
yeah. But if you want to specialize in something, by all means, like I want you to, like go deep. If you want to learn about entrepreneurship, I want you to learn everything there is to know about it. I want you to customize that so it's you, so that it jives with your fundamental core values, with your core motivations, because that will make you more motivated to do it no matter what. Like my favorite class that I took in college was student managed fund.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, I was in a class with like 6 other kids, and the professor gave us $100K, and he was like, all right, go invest it. Every investment we'll vote on, and you have to make a presentation about it. Ready, set, go.
Mm-hmm.
And that class fundamentally changed the way that I operated.
Yeah.
I was so motivated because I loved it.
Yeah.
Everything I liked about it. It was like, I got to make a presentation. I have to like, know my shit.
Yeah.
And convince people that this investment is good. And it's like, it works on just all these different skill sets. And I was just like blown away,
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Well, and I think that perhaps it was my inability to explain the modular degree in a simple manner just yet, because I think that's a very important concept to really delve into. You were basically engaged in the state of flow most of the time in that class, where that particular project, you were very into it. You had the passion to do it. And that's why I created the modular degree framework, or at least the premise of it at this particular point, because if you're trying to learn something and you're not interested in learning it, you're not actually going to either pick it up. You might retain it for a time, but you won't actually remember it or use it or apply it. And so I don't necessarily disagree that we need to learn, you need to learn the basics. That's obviously something we need to do. It's how you learn the basics is what I'm trying to change. Not necessarily what people learn, but how.
Gotcha. How people learn. Okay.
So think of it like this. Do you play video games much?
Not anymore.
Did you ever play any like RPGs back in the day?
Yeah, I played RuneScape.
Perfect. You know how there's like skill trees in mini games like that?
Yeah.
So if you go down one skill tree, you'll get like, hey, I want to get one point in one-handed swords, or 1 point in my shield defense. And these different points you go down, more and more you go down that tree, you're going to get better defense, better attack, better skills in those particular regions of knowledge, at least in the game's context of knowledge. And I wanted to take that skill tree application of ideas and apply it to learning. So if you have a concept like entrepreneurship, but you need to know operations and being able to if you have people underneath you, HR, understand game theory and how to make everyone happy as a business person. These different skill pools are all part of the entrepreneurship idea, big bubble, but there are different skills you need to learn. If you're really not jiving with operations just yet, you just can't get yourself to be motivated to learn it. You're not going to learn it. You're just going to hit roadblock after roadblock. But let's say HR leads into operations, because if you know why you help people and how to help people, then you might actually be a little bit more interested in how operations work. So you go down that skill tree branch. And then once you get up to a point where, hey, I know enough of this area, I want to go over to this skill tree and work more in operations. And they both kind of move up at the same time. And you have the choice. That's the key. It's the choice.
You have the choice. That is something that's fundamentally lacking from our education system. Mm-hmm. There is no choice. There is no, what do you think?
Yeah.
This is the material and you have to learn it.
And that's why I really wanted to get your opinion on it. I didn't want to ramble or waste our precious time, but I thought that having your brain, because you seem to have that like balance that I talked about earlier between science and philosophy that I often look for in people on the show. And I think that picking your brain on that would be very helpful, not only to me, but to the audience.
Yeah. I mean, choice, man. That's like this, that's a thing that we as kids really weren't given. We were just like told to do things. We didn't, some of us questioned it and we'd get reprimanded for it, like me. Yeah. Totally. And others would just do it. And I mean, choice would fundamentally change, I guess, even the maturity process of kids. They would be like, I think there would be less blind allegiance. Mm-hmm. There would be more why. there would be more questioning of like values, of interests, of things along those lines. Yeah.
Well, and you were saying earlier that you weren't necessarily that great as a student. Neither was I. I relatively hated school, actually, just because I felt confined by it. And I think that you probably felt at least similar in some cases that well as well. And there's probably a lot of people like us where we're almost like outliers in a way, but there's a lot of us. There's a lot of people who are like, hey, we don't want to follow the same study patterns as everyone else. And I think that creatives more like us are being stifled because of that.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, if I could have customized, if I had known that the workplace is more the what skills do you bring to the table more than where did you get your degree from or what degree did you get, I think that would have really changed the way that I went about higher education. I would have done the things I was interested in, you know. I don't really regret it because that experience kind of became like changed or made me who I am. You know, it really shaped me fundamentally. So I'm not like regretting it at all. But if I had been able to have the choice to study whatever, like if I could have just customized my degree, that would have been so much fun.
Yeah.
It would actually be fun to study and work and sweat and cry over things more, and I wouldn't be interested in finding an escape from it. Because I found myself very frequently like, I just want to I want this to be over because this sucks. Like, this is not fun. I don't get anything from this. I don't find it interesting. I get no pleasure from it. I'm just like, this sucks.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Well, and that's why I thought that perhaps you would be a good person to ask from, because it's like your three principles too in life. I feel like school, traditional school in a way, didn't qualify under those principles. Whereas a modular degree, you could build it to your standards, like your apartment fourplex that you're talking about earlier. You're building it to your standards, and that's how you want it to be. For whoever lives in it, you want to make sure that they actually have a high quality of existence there. And the same thing kind of goes to your own self-education.
Yeah. 100%. It's fundamentally what shaped who I am, I guess.
Yeah. How has your self-education in your own experience shaped who you are?
I realized that reading is the best way to get knowledge, because like if you are a true savant, if you are truly someone that has like a wealth of knowledge that they're willing to share, there is a 80% chance that will be in a book, right? So like me reading books and being patient with it, and like some people are like, I hate reading, I can't read. But I say to them, you haven't found the right book yet, because if you can read, and I guarantee there's a book out there that is for you that you will learn and enjoy. So pick up a book and start reading. The other thing is like, just start doing things.
Yeah.
Stop worrying about the trivialities of like failure and judgment and peer groups. And honestly, if you have a peer group that is judging you and is putting you down for trying cool things, you need to level up. Those people aren't going to be around in your life because they will hold you back. Yeah. You will become one of them if you don't escape them. Going back to the RPG thing, I have this like, I wouldn't call it like, you know how those RPGs like, oh, you cut like 1,000 trees, now you're level 3 and cutting trees. You're like, oh, great, awesome, sweet, good at cutting trees. There's a sense where your mentality shifts and you're like, I've leveled up. Yeah. Like, and other people notice it in you. You won't really notice it, but you're like, there'll be instances where you are tested, and those tests, if you pass them, signify a level up. And I think it is important through self-education that if you take self-education seriously, you'll see an increased frequency in level ups, basically.
Yeah, definitely. And that's exactly why I chose the skill tree concept as the application model for modular degree. And I think that what you just said, the past few sentences and whatnot, really wrapped up basically everything we talked about today in a nice, beautiful, wonderful piece. And so I just had one more little kind of story real quick before we kind of fully wrap up. And it reminded me of Pokemon. And you're talking about how when you do a lot of the simple tasks and where you're cutting down trees and getting that level up from that, it reminded me of Oblivion, where you're jumping up and down. If you jump so high for so long, you could literally just jump 10 feet in the air in the game. In Pokemon, in the beginning area where you're first building your team, you're first leveling up your creatures, it's interesting how that feeling of progress, that success, like, hey, I found this nice team to put together. I wanted to level them up to just a point where I'm ready for the first challenge. And I would find myself restarting the game after doing that, just so I can get that experience over again. And I think that's kind of a unique little tidbit there.
Yeah, it's the process, right?
Yeah, the process, being in love with the process.
Yeah.
Where can people find you and Polymath Planner online?
So right off the bat, you can check out my website, getpolymath.com. On Instagram, we are at GetPolymath. And on my Instagram is at Ranjit Marathay. You can reach me there, send me a message. Always willing to connect and chat with amazing people. Definitely one of my passions. So feel free to reach out. Always willing to chat.
Awesome. And I'll make sure I have those links in the description for people so they can find them. And thank you for coming on the Polycast.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.